After 6 months of meticulous planning, we finally made it to the airport. But at the gate, Ethan changed the script. He stood by the boarding area for New York, his brow furrowed as he checked his watch. I forgot to tell you, Serafina and I talked it over. We think New York is a better vibe for this trip. He didn't look at me. He just tapped the face of his Rolex. There's another flight to JFK in an hour. You have time to book a seat if you hurry. I stared at him, a sudden, suffocating lump forming in my throat. This trip to Miami was supposed to be our milestone. My dream vacation. And he had gone behind my back to let my best friend rewrite it. Serafina stood beside him, offering a sympathetic, sugary smile. Summer, don't be mad. You were so busy with the Madison account last month that Ethan and I just ended up going to Miami without you. I've seen the city, honestly, it's overrated. Not much to do. She gave me a playful, sisterly wink. Ethan caught her eye and a small, indulgent smile touched his lips. Then, he turned his frown back to me. You're the one who insisted on a vacation, he said, his voice laced with the irritation he always reserved for me. Change your ticket and get on the New York flight. Or don't. But I'm not waiting around. I watched them walk through the gate together, their silhouettes blending perfectly. I looked down at my ticket for Miami. It was crumpled, the edges white from where my grip had tightened. The intercom crackled to life. Final boarding call for flight 1204 to Miami. All remaining passengers, please proceed to gate B12. I didn't hesitate. I turned my back on the New York gate and walked toward Miami. I wasn't waiting anymore. This time, I was the one leaving. 5 minutes earlier, Ethan's fingers had been tapping rhythmically against his suitcase handle, the telltale sign of his growing impatience. I had suppressed the bitterness in my chest to ask a simple question. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I had spent half a year on this. I had sent him links to the best beach clubs, the hidden seafood spots, the galleries. He had always responded with a distracted, sure, whatever you think is best. I thought he was trusting my taste. I didn't realize he just wasn't listening. Ethan's scowl deepened at my question. Why does it need a why? I had a window of time last month, and Serafina had just closed that massive contract. You were buried in overtime. We couldn't just sit around waiting for you forever, could we? He adjusted his collar. Consider it a favor. I took her out to celebrate so you wouldn't feel guilty about missing her big win. The big win. I knew that contract. I was the one who had stayed up until 3 a.m. 3 nights in a row fixing her projections, drafting the pitch, and sourcing the vendors because she wasn't quite sure how to close yet. Even the overtime Ethan mentioned, that was me finishing the back-end paperwork for Serafina so she could go home early. I remembered her leaning her head on my shoulder that night, smelling like expensive lilies. Summer, you're a lifesaver. I'm still such a mess with the technical stuff. I only feel safe if you're the one doing the final check. I had smiled and told her it was fine. She was my best friend, I didn't mind looking out for her. Now I realized she wasn't resting at home while I worked. She was on a beach with my boyfriend. Serafina had put a hand on my arm at the airport. Summer, I know you won't let such a tiny thing ruin the mood. Ethan and I will be waiting for you in the city. I'll keep a close eye on him for you, make sure he doesn't get into any trouble in Manhattan. Ethan had chuckled at that, his face softening in a way it never did for me. Forget it, Sarah. Why bother explaining? We're going to miss the flight. He had grabbed his bag and effortlessly took hers too, trailing after her like a loyal shadow. No apology. No, are you okay? No second glance. I watched them walk away, and for the first time, I saw how well they fit together. There was no room for me in that picture. The exhaustion hit me then, not just from work, but from the 5-year marathon of trying to be enough for a man who was already looking past me. The intercom called for Miami one last time. I looked at the crowd moving toward their own destinations, their own lives. I realized I could see a beautiful view on my own. The sun was setting by the time I landed in Miami. After checking into the hotel, I took a car to Lazar, the restaurant Ethan had mentioned once. He'd said it was impossible to book and too much effort, so I'd taken it as a challenge. I had secured a reservation 6 months in advance. But when I gave my name to the host, he paused, a confused smile on his face. Ms. Miller? Yes, we have your reservation on file, but it was fulfilled last month. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I'm sorry. I wasn't in Miami last month. The manager tapped his tablet, his eyes flickering with a memory. Oh, I remember that night. A Mr. Ethan Miller? He came in with a young lady. He had the confirmation text on his phone. He leaned in slightly. We usually don't take early arrivals, but he told us it was their anniversary. A very special occasion. We even had the chef prepare a custom cake. Anniversary. The word hit me like a physical blow. They had celebrated their anniversary in the restaurant I had booked for us. The reservation I had spent months securing, the one I had dreamed of sharing with him, had been stolen and repurposed for her. He gestured toward the restaurant's celebration wall, a digital display of happy guests. See? There they are. I followed his finger. There was Ethan. He was laughing, a smear of chocolate frosting on his cheek. Serafina was leaning into him, her eyes bright with triumph. He looked at her with a raw, unprotected adoration I hadn't seen in years. When I had accidentally smeared cake on him during my last birthday, he had wiped it off with a cold, disgusted look. Summer, don't be childish. This suit is Italian silk. And honestly, at your age, you should know better. At your age. I had swallowed that insult too. I had told myself he was just a serious man who didn't like mess. I thought he had outgrown cute moments. Now I saw that he just didn't want them with me. He didn't want to laugh with me. He didn't want to be silly with me. He wanted to be adored by me, from a distance, at his convenience. And with Serafina? He was a completely different person. Playful. Warm. Utterly smitten. The manager noticed my face. Ms. Miller? Are you all right? We truly can't fit you in tonight, the books are closed. Perhaps another time. I blinked back the stinging in my eyes and gave him a small, empty smile. No. Another time won't be necessary. I walked out into a sudden, tropical downpour. The wind was fierce, but I barely felt it as I stood on the sidewalk, drenched. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I thought it might be Ethan. It wasn't. It was an Instagram notification. Serafina had posted a story. It was a photo of a late-night diner in New York. She and Ethan were eating greasy burgers, the kind of lowbrow food Ethan always mocked when I suggested it. The final slide was a photo of their glasses clinking. Just the two of us. The best things in life are unplanned. Heart emoji. I stared at the screen. Not a single text from Ethan. He hadn't asked if I landed. He hadn't asked why I wasn't in New York. To him, I simply didn't exist unless I was there to serve a purpose. I looked at my own reflection in the dark phone screen, red eyes, wet hair, a total mess. The last shred of hope in my chest finally flickered out. I tapped the like button on her post and left a comment. I hope you and Ethan have the time of your lives. You deserve each other. My phone rang within 30 seconds. It was Ethan. Summer, what the hell is wrong with you? His voice barked the moment I answered. That comment you left on Serafina's post, do you have any idea how that looks? People are going to get the wrong idea. He sounded so righteous, so genuinely offended on her behalf. Did I say something untrue, Ethan? I asked, my voice as cold as the rain. Are you not having fun? Is she not your preferred company? The line went quiet for a beat. I had never spoken back to him. I was the stable one. The understanding one. Delete the comment, Summer. Now, he hissed. And where the hell are you? Get to the hotel in Manhattan and apologize to her. She's crying because of you. I think I'll leave you to your unplanned evening, I said. You seem much happier without me. Summer, you're being slow, he snapped, his guilt turning into aggression. We couldn't just starve because you were taking forever to get your act together. You're an adult, take responsibility for your own timing. We can't all cater to you. Besides, you were the one who told me to look after Serafina when she moved here. That was the knife in the heart. When Serafina joined our firm, she knew no one. I had mentored her. I had asked Ethan to help her network. I had literally handed him the leash, and he had used it to walk away from me. Ethan, I said, my voice finally steady. We're done. Don't call me again. I hung up. I didn't wait. I blocked them both, phone, social media, everything. The rain stopped as suddenly as it had started, leaving behind a vibrant, neon-orange sunset over the Atlantic. I took a deep breath. The weight that had been crushing my chest for 5 years was gone. I spent the next 2 days following my own itinerary. I went to the galleries, I sat on the beach, and I realized that the scenery is much better when you aren't looking at it through someone else's shadow. I took photos of the sunsets, the waves, the street performers, and in every single one, I was smiling. A real smile. Not the forced, accommodating one I'd worn for 5 years. When I returned to the office on Monday, Ethan was already waiting at my desk. He looked disheveled, his face dark with fury. Summer. You blocked me? Over a dinner? I sat down calmly and opened my laptop. We broke up, Ethan. There's no reason for us to be in contact. He let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Are you still doing this? Are you really this petty? We didn't wait for you for one meal and you're throwing away 5 years? Serafina is your best friend. How can you be this small-minded? I'm at work, Ethan. Please don't disturb me. The office went quiet. People were starting to stare. Everyone had seen Serafina's post. The office group chats had been buzzing about it all weekend. Ethan's face turned a deep, humiliated red as he realized he was becoming the subject of the very gossip he hated. You're going to regret this, Summer, he spat before storming off. I didn't look up. I just typed 3 words at the top of a fresh document, letter of resignation. For years, I had stayed at this mid-sized firm because of Ethan. I had sacrificed promotions, turned down headhunters, and even moved into a support role because he said he wanted me to focus on the family we'll have one day. I had given him everything. I had given him my clients, my time, my youth. And for what? So he could climb the ladder using my work while I stood in the shadows, playing the role of the supportive girlfriend. While I was playing support, he was using my leads and my hard work to climb the ladder. I had given Serafina my best clients because she was struggling. No more. I walked the letter to human resources. When I got back to my desk, a colleague leaned over. Summer, check the internal forum. Ethan is losing his mind. I opened the company's anonymous board. The top post was titled, Leak, the Truth About Summer Miller, Sabotaging Colleagues Out of Jealousy. The post was a hit piece, written by Ethan. He claimed I was harassing Serafina because I was jealous of her performance. Because he was the golden boy of the firm, people were actually buying it. The comments were toxic. I knew she was a snake. She's been here forever and still acts like a gatekeeper. Typical mean girl behavior. Just because she's been here longer doesn't mean she owns the clients. I felt a surge of cold fury. I was leaving, but I wasn't leaving with my reputation in tatters. Serafina walked toward me then, her eyes red and puffy, the perfect image of a victim. Summer, please. Why are you doing this? I thought we were sisters. How can you doubt me and Ethan? Ethan pushed his way to her side, grabbing my wrist. That's enough. You're making her life a living hell over a misunderstanding. He looked at me with pure contempt. Is this because I haven't proposed yet? Is that what this is? You thought if you forced a vacation, I'd be cornered into it? I told you, Summer, I hate being pressured. I looked at the man I had once planned my entire future around. He looked ugly. Small. I don't want your proposal, Ethan, I said, wrenching my arm away. I wouldn't marry you if you were the last man on earth. Ethan froze. The sheer certainty in my voice seemed to rattle him. But he quickly regained his mask of superiority. Fine. I'll make you a deal. I'll marry you. We'll go to City Hall tomorrow. But only if you apologize to Serafina in front of the entire office right now. You tell everyone that the Instagram post was a joke you didn't get. I'll take down the forum post, and we can go back to being a team. He spoke like he was offering me $1 million settlement. He was so sure I'd crawl back. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and smiled. Okay. Ethan smirked at Serafina, victorious. See? I told you she just needed to be put in her place. The next morning, Ethan and Serafina stood in the center of the office during the morning meeting, waiting for my public apology. I have a brief announcement, Ethan said to the room. Regarding the misunderstanding between Summer and Serafina. Summer has realized her mistake and wants to clear the air. Everyone leaned in, phones out. They waited. 10 minutes passed. 20. Finally, the HR director walked into the center of the room. Summer Miller resigned effective immediately yesterday afternoon, she said, her voice echoing in the silence. Her clients have been notified, and her files are closed. She looked at Serafina. And since Summer was the one actually managing your top accounts, Serafina, we have 3 clients in the lobby right now demanding to know why their projects are in complete disarray. I suggest you get to work. The silence in the open plan bullpen did not descend all at once. It curdled. For 5 seconds after Brenda Vance, the senior vice president of human resources, let the final syllable fall, nobody moved. The hum of the industrial air conditioning units along the ceiling beams of Aegis Partner sounded. Suddenly deafening, a low, mechanical hiss that seemed to suck the oxygen straight out of the room. Ethan was still standing on the low wooden riser near the central projector screen. His hands were tucked casually into the pockets of his tailored charcoal trousers, his chin tilted at the precise, practiced angle of a man who believed every room he entered was an audience gathered for his benefit. But the smug half-smirk on his mouth had stiffened into something brittle, like dried varnish on old wood. What do you mean, resigned? Ethan asked. His voice was too loud, lacking its usual polished modulation. Brenda, that's ridiculous. Summer and I had an understanding. She's taking personal time to handle a family matter. We discussed this yesterday. Brenda did not blink. A woman who had survived 30 years of corporate restructuring and 3 mergers, she held a slim manila folder against her ribcage like a shield. Her eyes, magnified behind tortoiseshell frames, shifted from Ethan to Serafina, who had gone entirely pale beside him. Ms. Miller did not request personal leave, Ethan, Brenda said evenly, her voice carrying cleanly across 70 workstations. She submitted a formal, unilateral letter of immediate resignation at 5:15 yesterday evening. Her non-compete waiver was executed 2 years ago under the senior partner tier retention clause. Her severance was waived by her own request, and her workstation was cleared by building security at 6:30 this morning. Her company credentials have been revoked. As far as Aegis Partners is concerned, Summer Miller is no longer an employee. A muffled gasp broke out from the junior analysts cluster near the windows. Someone dropped a ceramic mug, it didn't shatter on the carpet, but the dull thud made Serafina flinch as if a gun had gone off. "That's impossible," Serafina murmured, her fingers fluttering up to the gold chain at her collarbone, a delicate, custom-stamped pendant Ethan had bought her during their secret long weekend in Miami. She was supposed to send me the raw data sheets for the Madison portfolio before 9. "We have the quarterly review with Donald Vance at 10:30. She promised. Brenda turned her gaze fully onto Serafina. The warmth that the HR head usually reserved for morning pleasantries was entirely absent. "Mr. Vance isn't waiting until 10:30, Serafina," Brenda said. "He arrived in the executive lobby 15 minutes ago with his legal counsel and his chief operating officer, along with representatives from Apex Logistics and Lumina Tech. They were informed by Ms. Miller last night that her personal management of their accounts had terminated. They are downstairs right now, demanding an immediate operational audit of their active campaigns." Brenda paused, letting the words settle into the room like lead weights. "The CEO has called an emergency meeting in boardroom A. Both of you are expected there immediately. I suggest you bring your source files." Brenda turned on her heel, her low heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood runner as she walked toward the executive elevators. Ethan didn't move for 3 long seconds. His gaze darted frantically across the room, landing on the corner desk where I had sat for 4 years. The desk was completely bare. The small brass lamp I had bought at an estate sale in Brooklyn was gone. The framed botanical prints were gone. The small, neat stack of color-coded project binders was gone. In their place sat a single, standard-issue silver laptop, wiped to factory settings, alongside a keycard and a parking pass, sitting dead center on the polished walnut surface. "She's bluffing," Ethan muttered under his breath, though the color draining from his face told a different story. He grabbed Serafina by the elbow, his grip visibly tight enough to pinch the silk of her sleeve. "Come on. Grab your tablet. We'll pull the Madison decks from the shared server." "Ethan, wait," Serafina whispered, her voice trembling as several senior account directors began whispering in small, tight clusters. "The shared drive. I don't have the administrative encryption keys. Summer held the master permissions for the back-end algorithms." Ethan stopped dead in the middle of the aisle. "What do you mean she held the permissions? You're the lead on the account. You signed the strategy brief." "Because she told me to." Serafina hissed back, tears of genuine panic finally welling in her carefully lined eyes. "She set up the predictive models on her private cloud workspace because the agency servers couldn't handle the data volume. She said it was easier if she ran the nightly balance checks herself." "You idiot," Ethan breathed, the charm he wore like expensive cologne evaporating in an instant. "You told me you understood the architecture. You told me it didn't matter as long as the client liked the slide deck," she fired back, her sugary demeanor completely shattered. From 30 feet away, Marcus Vance, the COO's chief strategist and no relation to Donald Vance, watched the exchange with a flat, calculating stare. He tapped his wristwatch, caught Ethan's eye, and pointed toward the boardroom corridor. 10 minutes, Ethan, Marcus said quietly. "Don't keep the money waiting." Across the bridge in Long Island City, the morning light spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of a minimalist loft cafe. I sat at a corner table with an ironstone mug of black coffee, watching the East River churn beneath the gray silhouette of the Queensboro Bridge. My personal phone lay face down on the reclaimed oak table. Since 8 o'clock, it had vibrated at 3-minute intervals, a relentless, buzzing insect trying to force its way back into my life. I didn't turn it over. I knew what was on that screen. Voice memos from Ethan, swinging wildly between condescending reconciliations and frantic threats. Text from Serafina, alternating between tearful pleas about sisterhood and frantic demands for server passwords. Notification pings from Aegis Partners' automated incident reporting system as client dashboards began throwing error codes. I took a slow sip of the coffee. It was hot, bitter, and clean. For 5 years, my mornings had begun at 5:15 with an adrenaline spike. I would wake up to Ethan's dry cleaning schedule, Ethan's presentation outlines, Serafina's frantic early morning voice notes asking why the variance calculations in her spreadsheets weren't balancing. I had lived in the permanent winter of someone else's ambition, running the engine room while they took bows on the sun deck. I opened my personal laptop, a matte black machine I had bought with my own savings 3 years ago, completely disconnected from the Aegis network. On the screen was an email draft from Donald Vance, sent to my personal inbox at 7:45 that morning. Summer. When you called me yesterday evening, I assumed you were leveraging an outside offer. After reviewing the operational handoff documentation you provided, I realized you were simply telling the truth. The Madison Group signed with Aegis Partners because of the predictive marketing model you built from scratch. If that model leaves with you, our capital leaves with you. My contract contains a key person clause under Section 14.b. Take 48 hours. Get some sleep. Then come to my office at 375 Park Avenue on Thursday morning. Let's talk about what a real partnership looks like. Donald. Beneath it were two similar messages from Christopher Sterling at Lumina Tech and Elena Rostova at Apex Logistics. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I closed the screen and looked out at the water. A strange, quiet sensation expanded in my chest. It wasn't triumph, not yet. It was the sudden, startling realization of space. When you spend half a decade making yourself small so that a mediocre man doesn't feel threatened by your height, the sudden absence of a ceiling feels like vertigo. I pulled out my phone, unlocked it without looking at the 47 missed calls, and dialed a number I had kept in my contacts for 3 years without ever daring to call. The line rang twice. Julian Vance, a deep, gravelly voice answered. Julian, I said calmly. It's Summer Miller. I'm ready to discuss the Vanguard venture. A brief, appreciative chuckle came through the receiver. I was wondering how long it would take you to realize you were feeding lions with scraps, Summer. Where are you? Long Island City. Give me 40 minutes, Julian said. I'll bring the incorporation papers. At 30 Rockefeller Plaza, on the 42nd floor of the Aegis corporate tower. The atmosphere was suffocating. Donald Vance sat at the head of the long marble table, his tailored charcoal overcoat still unbuttoned, his silver-topped cane resting against the arm of his chair. He was 71 years old, with skin like cured leather and eyes that had watched 3 market crashes without blinking. Across from him sat Arthur Pendleton, the managing partner of Aegis, sweating visibly through his bespoke poplin shirt. Ethan sat 3 seats down, his laptop open, his tie pulled slightly askew in an attempt to look like a brilliant strategist in the middle of a crisis rather than a man standing on a trapdoor. Serafina sat beside him, her hands trembling so violently she couldn't keep her pen from tapping against the glass table. Let me ensure I understand the operational structure of my $60 million deployment, Donald Vance said, his voice deceptively soft. He didn't look at Ethan. He looked at Arthur. For 18 months, I have been receiving weekly algorithmic performance audits signed by E. Miller and S. Lynn. Every strategic adjustment on the Madison accounts, our retail rollout, our digital asset reallocation, our customer acquisition spending, was predicated on these models. Correct, Donald, Ethan interjected smoothly, leaning forward and resting his forearms on the table. He flashed the charming, reassuring smile that had carried him through 5 years of executive dinners. And as you know, our proprietary analytical framework. I am not speaking to you, young man, Donald cut in, not raising his voice by a single decibel. Ethan's smile froze. Donald turned his icy gray eyes toward Serafina. Ms. Lynn. Open the live back-end interface for the third-quarter Madison conversion model. I want to see the real-time variance on our Midwest regional spend. Serafina swallowed. Her throat made a dry, clicking sound. Mr. Vance, our server is currently undergoing a scheduled maintenance synchronization following the departure of a junior administrative staff member. A junior administrative staff member? Donald's left eyebrow rose. He reached into his breast pocket, pulled out a pair of wire-rimmed reading glasses, and slipped them on. From the leather folder in front of him, he pulled a printed document, a single sheet of paper covered in dense, handwritten mathematical annotations, dated 6 months prior. This is the core architecture for the Madison algorithmic pipeline, Donald said, sliding the paper across the marble table until it stopped directly in front of Serafina. It was submitted as an addendum to our master service agreement. Do you recognize this handwriting, Ms. Lynn? Serafina looked down. The neat, precise script was unmistakable. It was mine. The margin notes included specific algorithmic overrides, data cleaning protocols, and proprietary regression models that had turned Madison's failing e-commerce branch into a $200 million asset. That's our internal drafting style, Serafina stammered, her face turning an ugly, blotchy red. That is Summer Miller's handwriting, Donald said flatly. I have known Summer's work since she was an intern at my brother's private equity fund in Chicago 7 years ago. When I brought my business to Aegis, I made it explicitly clear to Arthur that my capital was anchored to her analytical oversight. He turned his gaze onto Arthur Pendleton, whose collar was now visibly damp. Arthur, did you believe I spent 40 years in private equity just to let a 28-year-old empty suit and an Instagram personality manage my balance sheet? Donald, please, Arthur pleaded, holding up 2 placating hands. There has Been an internal communication failure. Summer was a valued member of the support staff, but Ethan and Serafina are the creative and strategic drivers. Then demonstrate it, Donald said. He leaned back, crossed his legs, and tapped the face of his gold Patek. Philippe. You have 5 minutes, Ethan. Explain the mathematical derivation of the beta weighting model on page 4 of that document. If you cannot explain how the predictive variance handles market volatility during our holiday cycle, I am invoking the immediate termination clause of our contract for material breach. And my legal team will file for a full freeze on your management retainers by noon. Ethan's mouth opened. The room seemed to shrink around him. He stared at the sheet of paper. To him, the equations were nothing more than black ink on white parchment, decorations he had glanced at over my shoulder while I worked late at our kitchen table, sipping wine while I rubbed my temples in exhaustion. Don't worry about the math, babe, he had told me once, laughing as he stroked my hair with one hand and checked sports scores with the other. That's why I have you. You make the engine, I drive the car. Nobody buys the car for the spark plugs. The beta weighting, Ethan began, his voice cracking slightly, is derived from a standard regression, based on historical quarterly metrics from the preceding 3 fiscal years. Wrong, Donald said instantly. It accounts for seasonal consumer sentiment. It is a non-linear stochastic model designed to bypass standard seasonal bias. Donald interrupted, his voice dropping into pure ice. A first-year quantitative analyst at Columbia could tell you that within 10 seconds of looking at the second line. You don't have the faintest idea what this is, do you? Ethan's hands clenched into fists beneath the table. The humiliating heat burned in his ears. Mr. Vance, this is a technical detail handled by our operational tier. My role is client stewardship and macro strategy. Your role, Donald said, picking up his cane and standing up with deliberate slowness, is finished. He looked at Arthur Pendleton. You will have our formal notice of rescission in 1 hour. We are pulling the Madison account, effective immediately. And I will personally contact Elena Rostova and Christopher Sterling to inform them that their portfolios are currently being steered by decorative figureheads. Donald, wait. Arthur surged to his feet, knocking his chair back against the wood paneling. We can fix this. We can bring Summer back. We'll offer her a full partnership. We'll restructure the entire department. Donald paused at the boardroom door. He looked back over his shoulder, his gaze sweeping over Ethan's pale, sweat-slicked face and Serafina's silent tears. Summer Miller didn't leave because she wanted a raise, Arthur, Donald said quietly. She left because she finally realized the people she was carrying weren't worth the wait. You couldn't buy her back with this entire building. The heavy oak door swung shut behind him with a sharp, pneumatic click. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, I was standing in the center of the 2-bedroom apartment Ethan and I had shared in Murray Hill. The space was quiet, save for the sound of packing tape being sliced with a utility knife. 2 professional movers from a white glove relocation service were efficiently dismantling the library shelving I had purchased 3 years ago with my first major bonus. I sat on a single wooden stool in the kitchen, a cup of tea in my hand, watching them work. I didn't take much. I took the mid-century credenza my grandmother had left me. I took my books, my clothes, my kitchenware, and the high-end espresso machine I had paid for in full. I left the Italian leather sofa Ethan had insisted on, the one he claimed gave our living room executive presence, along with the 85-inch television he had put on my credit card and never fully reimbursed. On the polished granite island, I laid out 3 items in a neat, symmetrical row. First, Ethan's spare keycard to the building. Second, a certified cashier's check for my remaining half of the lease breakage fee, calculated down to the penny. Third, a printed spreadsheet detailing the 5-year financial ledger between us. It accounted for every shared vacation where I had covered the flights while he covered a single dinner, every grocery bill, every utility payment, and the exact market value of the proprietary strategy templates he had copied from my personal laptop to pass off as his own. At the bottom of the ledger, I had written a single line in ink. Balance settled. Do not contact me again. The front door chimed. The lock rattled, and Ethan burst into the apartment, his trench coat damp from the rain that had started falling over Manhattan, his hair unkempt, his briefcase clutched in his hand like a weapon. He stopped dead when he saw the 2 movers lifting a stack of wardrobe boxes. What the hell is this? Ethan demanded, his voice raw. He dropped his briefcase onto the floor and strode toward me. Summer, what are you doing? Tell them to stop. Tell them to get the hell out of my apartment. It's my apartment too, Ethan, I said mildly, not rising from the stool. Or rather, it was until 2 o'clock today, when the building management accepted my lease termination buyout. Are you insane? He ran both hands through his hair, his eyes bloodshot and wild. Do you know what happened at the office today? Do you have any idea the chaos you caused? I imagine Donald Vance was thorough, I replied, taking a slow sip of tea. You sabotaged us. Ethan shouted, stepping closer. The two movers paused, exchanging a glance. One of them, a broad-shouldered man named Ray, stepped casually into the kitchen corridor, crossing his arms. Ethan noticed him and checked his advance, though his chest heaved with rage. You went behind my back to the clients, Ethan hissed, lowering his voice to a venomous whisper. You fed Donald Vance confidential internal data just to humiliate me and Serafina. Arthur suspended both of us pending an internal investigation. Do you know what that does to my reputation? To my career? Your career? I looked at him, genuinely fascinated by the sheer elasticity of his narcissism. Ethan, you never had a career. You had my work with your signature on it. That's a lie and you know it, he snapped. I brought in the relationships. I took the dinners. I managed the optics. You're good with numbers, Summer, but you don't understand how the real world works. People don't buy spreadsheets, they buy vision. They buy me. Then go sell yourself, I said softly. Why are you here screaming at me if you're the one with the vision? Go back to Arthur. Rebuild the Madison models. Close the Apex logistics contract. You don't need me, remember? I'm just the slow, petty, childish girl who couldn't handle an unplanned weekend in New York. Ethan flinched as his own words from the airport and the phone call were thrown back at him, stripped of their power and exposed for the cheap cruelty they were. Summer. His tone shifted abruptly. It was a maneuver I had seen him execute 100 times with difficult clients, the sudden downshift into intimate, wounded vulnerability. He dropped to one knee beside the island, reaching out to take my hand. I pulled my hand away before he could touch my skin. He let his hand hang in the air, his eyes softening into a practiced look of remorse. Look. I know you're hurt. I know the Miami thing looked bad. I swear to God, it wasn't what you think. Serafina was going through a breakdown after her breakup with David. She needed a friend. I only took her to Miami because I didn't want to worry you while you were stressed with work. And the anniversary dinner at Lazar? I asked, my voice calm, level, almost curious. The custom cake? The photo on the celebration wall? Ethan's mouth twitched. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped, revealing the cold, cornered panic beneath. That was a marketing stunt, he lied, stumbling over the words. The restaurant manager was an old friend of Serafina's family. We used the reservation so it wouldn't go to waste. Summer, please. 5 years. We built a life together. You're going to throw away our future over a few stupid mistakes? He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. He flipped. It opened with a trembling thumb. Inside was a 2-carat diamond ring, the exact setting I had pointed out in a window in Soho 3 years ago, when I still believed his promises about building a family. I bought this 2 weeks ago, he whispered, holding it toward me like an offering at an altar. I was going to propose in Central Park this weekend. That's why I wanted you in New York, Summer. I wanted to surprise you. I swear. It. I looked at the ring. The stone caught the overhead kitchen light, throwing off sharp, cold facets of blue and white. A year ago, 3 months ago, perhaps even 3 weeks ago, this gesture would have shattered me. I would have found a way to excuse him. I would have blamed myself for being suspicious, for being difficult, for not working harder to deserve his love. Now, looking at that ring, I felt nothing. Not sadness, not longing, not even disgust. It was just a piece of compressed carbon in a velvet box, held by a stranger who had stolen my labor and treated my heart like an expendable resource. Ethan, I said gently. Yes, babe. A desperate flicker of hope lit up his face. You bought that ring on Monday afternoon, I said, pointing toward the small receipt slip peeking out from the side of the velvet box lining. At the Zales outlet near Grand Central. After I blocked your number. Ethan's face went entirely white. You didn't buy it because you love me, I said, standing up from the stool and smoothing down my wool coat. You bought it because you realized that without me, you're an empty suit facing a corporate audit. Keep the ring. You'll need to pawn it to pay your half of next month's rent. I nodded to Ray. We're done here. Take the boxes down to the truck. Summer, don't walk out that door. Ethan yelled, scrambling to his feet, his desperation turning back into ugly, bared teeth fury. If you leave, you're dead. In this industry, Arthur will blackball you across every agency in Manhattan. You'll never lead a portfolio again. I stopped at the threshold of the apartment, looking back at him one last time. He stood in the middle of the bare living room, surrounded by empty space. Clutching his cheap velvet box in one hand and his useless briefcase in the other. Ethan, I said, meeting his eyes with a calm that cut deeper than any scream. I don't work for agencies anymore. I own one. I closed the door behind me, and for the first time in 5 years, the air smelled entirely clean. 6 weeks later, the midtown skyline was dusted with the first crisp snow of December. On the 38th floor of the newly constructed glass tower at 520 Madison Avenue, the brass lettering on the frosted glass entrance gleamed under warm architectural lighting. Vanguard Strategies Group. Strategic Operations and Portfolio Analytics. Summer Miller, Managing Partner. Julian Vance, Senior Advisory Partner. Inside, the open floor plan was quiet, efficient, and filled with the focused hum of 20 top-tier quantitative analysts and brand strategists. There were no ping-pong tables, no performative beanbag chairs, and no toxic internal forums. Every desk was equipped with dual high-end workstations, and every employee owned an equity stake in the firm. I sat in my private corner office, looking over the final onboarding documents for our latest client acquisition, Apex Logistics. Beside me, Elena Rostova, the sharp-featured, notoriously demanding CEO of Apex, signed her name with a gold fountain pen on the master agreement. I have to admit, Summer, Elena said, capping the pen with a satisfying click. When you were at Aegis, I always wondered why our quarterly reports sounded like they were written by a genius but presented by an amateur. I smiled, pouring her a cup of freshly brewed oolong tea. The agency model often rewards the loudest voice in the room, Elena. Not the one doing the math. Well, the loudest voices are currently drowning, Elena remarked with a dry smile. Did you hear about Aegis? I don't follow their internal news, I said honestly. Arthur Pendleton had to settle out of court with Donald Vance last week to avoid a public fraud investigation regarding the Madison campaign's reported metrics, Elena said, taking a sip of tea. They lost 40% of their billing in under a month. And your former colleagues, what were their names? Ethan and Serafina? What about them? Arthur demoted Ethan to a regional junior coordinator role and stripped his commission structure, Elena said, watching my face carefully for a reaction. Serafina was let go entirely after the Apex audit revealed she had double-billed our account for creative strategy sessions that never occurred. Here she's trying to transition into full-time lifestyle coaching. I simply nodded, feeling no satisfaction, only the clean, cool detachment of someone reading about a distant weather event. They made their choices, I said. Let's review your fourth quarter supply chain projections. For the next 2 hours, we worked through the complex logistical frameworks for Apex's European expansion. My mind felt sharp, unburdened, operating at a speed I hadn't experienced since graduate school. When you no longer have to spend half your mental bandwidth anticipating a partner's fragile ego and cleaning up a colleague's deliberate mistakes, your capacity for real work becomes limitless. At 4 o'clock, Julian Vance knocked on my open door. He carried 2 leather-bound invitation envelopes embossed with gold foil. The Tri-State Financial and Marketing Gala is tomorrow night at the Plaza, Julian said, tossing one onto my blotter. You're scheduled as the keynote speaker on quantitative predictive modeling in macro turnarounds. I looked down at the heavy cardstock. Is Aegis attending? Arthur bought a sponsor table 6 months ago before the collapse, Julian said, with a wolfish grin. He can't get a refund. Ethan Miller is listed as their secondary representative. It seems Arthur is making him earn his keep by handing out promotional brochures at the networking foyer. I looked at the invitation for a moment, then picked up my pen. Good, I said quietly. Make sure our team is seated at table 1. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of crystal chandeliers, black tuxedos, and silk evening gowns. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, champagne, and the high-stakes murmur of New York's financial elite. Ethan Miller stood near the entrance of the networking promenade, adjusting the cuffs of his tuxedo. The tuxedo was the same one he had worn to the Madison Gala the previous year. But it felt looser now, hanging awkwardly off his frame. His face was drawn. Dark shadows bruised beneath his eyes, and his Rolex, the watch he used to tap so arrogantly at the airport gate, was gone from his wrist, replaced by a bare leather strap. He had sold the watch 3 weeks ago to cover the penalty fees on his apartment lease. Beside him, Serafina stood in a rented emerald gown that was slightly too long for her. Her smile was brittle, her eyes darting nervously across the crowd of executives who barely acknowledged their presence. Why are we here, Ethan? She whispered sharply, clutching a stack of Aegis Marketing brochures to her chest. Nobody is talking to us. Every time I try to hand a card to someone from the Sterling group, they just walk away. They know. Shut up and smile, Serafina, Ethan hissed through clenched teeth, his eyes scanning the room for potential marks. If we don't bring in at least 2 prospective leads tonight, Arthur is terminating my contract by Friday. Do you want to move back to your parents' house in Ohio? Because that's where you're heading if we don't fix this. Me? Serafina's voice rose in pitch, drawing a cold glance from a nearby investment banker. You're the one who told me Summer was dispensable. You told me you knew how to run the accounts. You used my name on the billing reports to hide your own kickbacks. I told you what you needed to hear because you were incompetent. Ethan snarled, turning on her with a sudden, vicious glare. If you had spent half as much time learning the actual software as you did picking out outfits for Instagram, we wouldn't be standing here like waitstaff. You bastard. Before Serafina could finish, the house lights dimmed. The resonant chime of the ballroom sound system echoed through the hall, signaling the start of the keynote address. The heavy double doors of the grand ballroom swung open, and the crowd began filtering in toward the banquet tables. Ethan and Serafina were forced to take their seats at table 24, shoved into the back corner near the service kitchen doors. At the front of the hall, seated at table 1 alongside Donald Vance, Elena Rostova, and Christopher Sterling, sat a woman in a backless, midnight blue silk gown. Her hair was swept up in an elegant, modern chignon, exposing the clean line of her neck and shoulders. A single diamond pendant rested against her collarbone, sharp, simple, and blindingly bright. Ethan froze in his chair. Is that? Serafina gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That's not her. It can't be. It was. The master of ceremonies stepped to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues of the tri-state business community. Tonight, we are honored to introduce our keynote speaker. In less than 2 months, her firm has restructured over $500 million in active market capital, pioneering new standards in algorithmic predictive strategy. Please welcome the managing partner of Vanguard Strategies Group, Ms. Summer Miller. The applause was immediate, thunderous, and led by the most powerful table in the room. I stood up from table 1, smoothed the silk of my gown, and walked up the stairs to the stage with a steady, unhurried grace. I adjusted the microphone. I looked out over the sea of 400 faces. I saw Donald Vance nodding with quiet pride. I saw Elena Rostova raising her glass. And way in the back, sitting in the shadow of the kitchen doors, I saw Ethan Miller, his mouth slightly open, his face pale as marble, looking at me as if I were a ghost. I did not pause. I did not falter. Good evening, I began, my voice clear, resonant, and effortless through the sound system. In business, as in life, we are often told that value lies in the presentation. We are taught that charisma can substitute for substance, and that momentum is the same as progress. I clicked the remote in my hand, and the massive high-definition screen behind me illuminated with a clean, devastatingly elegant data architecture framework. Tonight, I want to talk to you about the cost of illusions, and the mathematical inevitability of truth. For 25 minutes, the room belonged entirely to me. There was no stuttering, no hesitation, no reliance on buzzwords. I took the audience through complex economic volatility models, demonstrating how transparency and precision outlast superficial marketing every single time. When I concluded with a roadmap for sustainable corporate restructuring, the entire room stood up. A standing ovation at the plaza is rare. When it happens, it is absolute. I stepped away from the podium, bowed slightly to the room, and walked down the steps directly into a circle of waiting industry leaders. The gala afterparty moved to the glass-enclosed terrace overlooking Central Park South. The snow was falling heavily now, blanketing the trees in white silence. I stood near the stone balustrade with a glass of sparkling water, breathing in the cold air that filtered through the cracked glass doors. Summer. I didn't turn around immediately. I recognized the voice. It sounded smaller. Now, stripped of its arrogance, carrying the desperate tremor of a drowning man. Ethan stepped onto the terrace. He had left his jacket inside, his white shirt was rumpled, his bow tie undone and hanging loose around his collar. Ethan, I said, turning to face him. You shouldn't be back here. This area is reserved for keynote guests. Summer, please, he said, taking 2 frantic steps toward me before stopping. When he saw the absolute, impenetrable calm in my eyes. Just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. 5 minutes. You have 2, I said, checking my watch. It was a simple, elegant Cartier tank I had bought for myself last week. Make it count. Ethan swallowed, his chest heaving. I watched you up there tonight. You were incredible. You were the smartest person in that room. I always knew. You had that in you, Summer. I always told everyone you were the real brains behind our team. I tilted my head, letting a faint, dry smile touch my lips. Did you? Is that why you posted on the internal forum that I was an incompetent saboteur driven by jealousy? Ethan flinched as if struck. That was a mistake. Arthur made me do it to protect the agency's share price. I was trying to save our positions, Summer. Everything I did, even the mistakes, I did because I thought we were building something together. We were never building anything together, Ethan, I said calmly. I was building a foundation, and you were standing on my shoulders, telling the world you could fly. I broke it off with Serafina, he blurted out, stepping closer, his hands outstretched. It's over. Completely over. She was toxic, Summer. She manipulated me. She used me to get to your work. I see that now. I moved out of the apartment. I'm living in a studio in Queens. I'm starting over. He dropped to his knees right there on the stone terrace, the wet snow soaking through his trousers, completely unconcerned with who might see him through the glass doors. Take me with you, he begged, tears finally spilling down his cheeks, genuine in their self-pity. Hire me at Vanguard. I don't need a partner title. Make me an associate. Make me an analyst. I'll work 70 hours a week. I'll do whatever you tell me. Just don't leave me behind like this, Summer. I can't survive without you. I looked down at him. I remembered the airport gate. I remembered the cold, dismissive tap of his watch. I remembered him telling me to change my ticket or be left behind. Walking away with Serafina without a single backward glance. I remembered the rain in Miami, the custom anniversary cake, and the 5 years of my youth I had poured into a bottomless pit of his vanity. I felt no rage. I felt no urge to mock him. I only felt the profound, peaceful clarity of a woman who had finally stepped out of a cage she had built with her own patience. Ethan, I said softly. He looked up, his tear-streaked face full of desperate, pathetic hope. Yes. Summer. When we were at the airport, I said, my voice steady as the winter air, you told me that you weren't waiting around for me. He froze. You were right, I continued, taking a step past him toward the warm, light-filled ballroom. You shouldn't have waited. Because I'm already 1,000 miles ahead of you. I didn't stop. I walked through the terrace doors, leaving him kneeling alone in the snow. 6 months later. The morning sun over South Beach was a brilliant, unfiltered gold. The Atlantic stretched out toward the horizon in endless bands of turquoise and deep indigo, the waves breaking gently against the white sand. I sat on the private balcony of a penthouse suite at the Faena Hotel, a cup of fresh espresso on the small marble table beside me. A breeze carrying the scent of salt and tropical flowers lifted the linen curtain behind me. My laptop was open, displaying the morning financial wire. Aegis Partners files for restructuring following loss of key enterprise accounts. Former account director Ethan Miller barred from financial consulting following regulatory settlement. I closed the tab without reading further. The past had finally become what it was always meant to be, irrelevant data points in an archived file. My phone chimed with a text from Julian Vance. The Miami regional office lease is signed. The team is ready for the ribbon cutting at 2. Take your time enjoying the morning, partner. I smiled, setting the phone down. I stood up, walked to the edge of the balcony, and rested my hands on the warm stone railing. Below me, the beach was coming alive, runners on the boardwalk. Palm trees swaying in the steady trade wind, the ocean vast and wide and completely open. 6 months ago, I thought my life was ending at an airport gate because a man refused to see me. Now, looking out at the endless water, I realized the truth. He hadn't left me behind. He had simply stepped out of my way. I finished my coffee, picked up my sunglasses, and walked out into the sun.